Good morning. Welcome to the UNL Center for Academic Successes webinar interview series BroadCAST. And I'm your host, Dan Hutt. We are delighted to have with us here today UNL French professor and award-winning author, Dr. Jordan Stump. Dr. Stump, it's a great pleasure and honor to have you with us here this morning.
Me too. Thank you.
You bet. Well, I think we'll dive right in. We'd like to know where did you grow up and what was high school like for you?
So I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas.
Okay.
Yeah, and high school, it was okay, I guess.
Yeah.
I, I was an extremely mediocre student in high school.
Okay.
Just no, I wasn't very good at anything. Except music, that was one thing I cared about, but I don't think I ever got an A all throughout high school. And I knew people, I had friends. I had a girlfriend, for goodness sake, who was like, uh, National Merit Society, whatever that thing is called.
Yeah.
And take the SAT. I didn't even know what the SAT was. And these people would take like the practice SAT, and they would compare their scores, and these. So I knew all kinds of these high-powered intellectual types, and I don't care about anything much, apart from music. Yeah, it was okay.
Yeah. Lawrence
But it
is one
wasn't.
of my Lawrence is one of my favorite places. That must have been an interesting place to grow
Yeah,
up.
yeah, it's funny. You get a little spoiled growing up in Lawrence because you start to think, oh, every place is like Lawrence,
Yeah.
and it isn't. But you learn that actually there's many things that I like better than that I like in Lincoln much better than what I like about Lawrence. So it's every place has its own spirit, and but I do miss Lawrence. I go back there and I think, oh yes, the hill, the downtown.
Yes. Everything that I love is in Lawrence.
Yeah, yeah.
Great music venues,
Yeah, it's
good
true.
bookstores, a couple good record stores on Mass
Absolutely.
Avenue.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Were you whether or not you were a good student in high school, were you a big reader already at that point?
Not particularly, no.
Okay.
That came later.
Okay.
I read a little bit, but I wasn't a big enthusiastic reader. When we took English classes and they had us read things, I often liked them. I like Macbeth. Who doesn't? On the other hand, I think there were a lot of books that they had us supposedly read in high school that I never managed to get through,
Uh-huh.
and a lot that I found extraordinarily boring. And In terms of my own, I think at some point my parents had Kurt Vonnegut novels lying around, and so I would read those kind of over and over again, but never
Yeah.
very attentively or anything like that. But
Right.
I was not and am not an intellectual, and I don't, and I wasn't. Reading was not a big thing for me. Music, that was what mattered to me more than anything else.
That seems so unlikely to me that to hear you say that you are not an intellectual. That you would be the first person on this campus that I would suggest as an intellectual.
Well,
Now,
maybe it's all a pose. Who knows? But
uh,
I feel like I'm less interested in um, um, ideas than I am in the shape of those ideas, the way
uh-huh.
that those ideas are put together.
Okay.
And so to me, that means that I'm more interested in a kind of beauty than I am interested in the attempt to determine truth from falsehood. And so
Okay.
to me, I see myself more as, and this is a word that nobody wants to call themselves an aesthete. And so it's sort of fun to say, well, yeah, I'm an aesthete. That's what I am. I'm an aesthete and not an intellectual in a world of intellectuals who don't.
I
So
adore that.
yeah, isn't that cool?
That that is
That's
very
my
cool.
that's my label from now on. Yeah, aesthete.
I love that. Absolutely. Now tell us more about this music stuff. Music was really important to you as a young person. Tell us more.
Oh my goodness, yes. It was everything to me.
Okay.
Oh, good. I mean, I could go on for hours, but I discovered classical music essentially when I was in seventh grade and just fell absolutely head over heels in love. And I hadn't had any musical training, but I started taking piano lessons, and it was I was a fanatic fan of classical music, and then later on I discovered jazz. And then much later, I discovered uh, the dreadful rock of the mid '70s, and then and then after that, I discovered punk, and that was really when things started for me. Punk
Wow.
absolutely changed my life, and I was an extremely devoted punk in Lawrence,
Wow.
Kansas, so, where it didn't actually mean anything to be a punk. But
Yeah.
but then really I discovered beyond that I sort of got into um, it was very hard to find people to play with, because nobody wanted to play punk, and so I would often play in bands with founded by Grateful Dead fans and crap like that.
Yeah.
And so that eventually one of those things, somebody said, "Oh, look, I have this old synthesizer. I'll give you this thing." Oh, great, fantastic! And then I discovered synthesizer. So that is, if I ever did anything real with music, it was electronic, sort of, trance,
New wave.
experimental stuff, mostly done just in a home studio, etc. And that was just like that was throughout college. That was all I wanted. That was all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I discovered French, and it was like, wow, well, there's also that.
Yeah. What were
So
some of
music.
the bands that you were really passionate about in college?
Oh, goodness. I loved a band called The Fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, British post-punk bands. Politically dubious, but
Uh-huh.
but still, I like Marky Smith's voice. And I like Joy Division pretty well. I loved a band called Wire. You ever heard of them?
Oh,
That's
sure. You
yeah, right.
bet.
Wow. That's and then my heart is still with a lot of punk bands that I loved when I was 18, Buzzcocks, Sex Pistols,
Yeah.
people like that. So
Were
yeah,
you
I mean
out
that's
playing in bands in
yeah, like I
bars and
said,
stuff? Okay.
it's hard. The problem is it's hard to find people to play with, because
Yeah.
not many people like that kind of music. I mean,
Yeah.
it's actually an interesting phenomenon that I mean, this was when I was like 19. I was passionate about that kind of music, and if I talked about it to other people, they were like, "That stuff is horrible. I mean, it's not real music. It's not." I mean, it would actually be like, we would have arguments about the validity of the kind of music that I like. And I almost wonder if
Yeah.
that's not even a thing that happens anymore. But so it was hard to find other, sort of fellow travelers. Eventually, like I said, I was in a lot of bands with people whose musical taste I just couldn't stand. Eventually, I kind of drifted in with a slightly uh, more interesting crowd and was in a few bands, none of which ever really lasted very long. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
how it goes. Uh,
Yeah. My friend and your former student, Andy Seeger, let
oh
me
yeah,
know that you once played with Freedy Johnston.
yes, indeed.
Yeah. Was that during your college days?
Yeah, that was I will always remember him as Fred Fotzer. It's hard for me to,
Okay.
but yeah, he and I were in an English class together at college, and we were both kind of, I don't know, we sat, just coincidentally we happened to sit down to each other next to each other on the first day, and so continued to do that, and we were both kind of different from other people in various ways, and kind of became friends, and then started talking about music, and then decided, oh, we should form a band, and so we did. We had a band called Animal Bones that was active in Lawrence for oh maybe all of 6 months, and then I think he I think he left for New York to great fame and fortune. Well deserved.
Yeah.
Fred is a fantastic guy, great songwriter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you still engaged with music in any way
In such a
today?
different way. I used to have a piano, but then I moved, and it wasn't a very good piano. I didn't really have room for piano in my own house, in my new house, even though it's bigger. But I kind of stopped doing it. It's time, I mean, being
Yeah.
a professor is hard. It takes a lot of time. So the idea that I can sort of sit down and play for a half an hour is like, that's half an hour that I could be doing other things that somebody really insists that I do before tomorrow. So it's just very hard. I'm not complaining. It's the best life in the world, but it's very hard to find that kind of moment when you can just do whatever. And
Right.
so music is what gets sacrificed. What on the other hand, it's still absolutely essential to my life. I mean, I still buy CDs. I know this is embarrassing, but I've gone back to classical music and rediscovered and discovered new classical music. For pre-Baroque French opera. My God, the stuff they came up with. So I always have music playing in my house, always from essentially the moment I
Hey,
get up until the moment I go to bed,
I
always.
am I imagine you have having a massive music collection and a terrific stereo. Is that true?
It's kind of true, and yet I always look at it and think, geez, I don't have anything to play. I got to get more stuff.
Yeah. Very good. Now, did you, as a youth growing up in Lawrence, did you always kind of know you would go to college? And what did you major in as an undergrad?
I think it was always it was not a question. Yeah,
Uh,
it went without saying. You go to college. That's what happens after high school.
yeah.
And but on the other hand, I was like I say, I was a very mediocre student in high school, and I was well at the beginning in college. I wasn't a student at all. I flunked out my first semester.
Uh-huh.
I dropped out. I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about anything, and I didn't go to class, and I just didn't give a damn, and wasted a bunch of my parents' money, which is terrible. And it was, but I didn't give a damn. I did not give a damn. That's one thing that I've always been fairly good at is not caring about stuff. The and so I dropped out, and I got a job washing dishes. And that was like the beginning of this very, very happy time in my life, because that made sense to me. Washing dishes made sense to me. That was something I could care about.
Yeah.
So, it goes out with food on it, comes back with, yeah, with junk all over it, and you make it clean, and then it goes out again, and you can say, "Oh, I remember." Something comes back with, the remains of a baked potato and a piece of pot roast or whatever, and say, "Oh, I remember when that went out," and now here it's come back. I remember telling my mother that it was so exciting because it's like I saw it come out, and now it's come back,
No,
and my
you know
mother
it's yours because it came back to you.
came back to me, and I think she actually literally broke down in tears. It's like, oh my God, my son is pathetic.
That's terrific.
But but I loved it. It was so fantastic to be able to, I mean, I loved, I guess the thing was, this was the first time in my life that I'd ever really understood the value and the necessity of actually working, actually doing something unpleasant for the sake of a better good.
Uh-huh.
I didn't get that in school ever. It was washing dishes that taught me that. And it's not like I had some sort of road to Damascus moment where I suddenly became a moral person again, but it's just like wow, well, this is actually I like being able to make things better. It's and In a sense, although there is no connection at all, that's kind of maybe the beginning of the little road that brought me here because I think the teaching is also making things better.
You
It's
bet.
taking something which is, a person, I shouldn't say something, but a person who doesn't need to be improved, but
Hmm.
who, for whom I can do something, I hope,
Yes. Yes.
and send them out maybe differently. Just like the dish gets sent out. I'm going to spin this metaphor out until it's dead. Just as the dish is sent out clean and fresh and ready for new new adventures, so too do my students. No, but you see what I mean. There is there
Yeah.
is there is a kind of a similarity there.
Yeah, absolutely.
In college, I mean, in terms of a major, so I eventually went back, but I was hopeless. I couldn't decide what a major was. I tried music, didn't get along with music people, and I tried English, but I didn't like often. I still wasn't very good at reading. And then I had to take a language class, and so I took French, which I had already learned a little bit, and I found it fairly easy, and I didn't have to work very hard. I got okay grades, and so I thought, well, good, this is my major. And then I discovered the literature,
I've
Yeah.
got a bunch of students here that would like to know about that. Quentin and Yana of Lincoln, Jake and Alexa of Omaha, Sam of Grand Island, and Kiera of Galesburg, Kansas would all like to know how you became interested in French literature.
It was just, I mean, it was a class
Yeah,
with a, a pretty good professor, but really it was more just the books themselves. And I guess I was just ready for it.
yeah,
I French literature tends to be sort of dark,
uh-huh,
and that sort of spoke to me. And it was the realization. It's so one of the things that we read is a play called Phèdre. It's a 17th century French kind of imitation of an ancient Greek tragedy, the tragedy of Phaedra and Hippolytus. And it's hard. I mean, it's it's 17th century verse theater. It's not something you're used to.
yeah,
And I sort of read it, and I said, okay, it was work. It was work, line after line. Okay, I see what's being said. Okay, I see what's being said. Okay, I see what's being said. And it was mostly at the beginning just trying to understand what's going on. And then
yeah.
suddenly there's these moments like, and there's a line, for instance, that's just so beautiful. And it's just, you just want to say it again. And then, wow. And then that line is so beautiful. And it's beautiful because of the two lines before it that kind of prepared it. And then this line comes along and boom, makes this, explodes. And it was that realization that reading, seeing how a story gets told can give you emotions as explosive as listening to really, 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 really great music, really great punk rock that's like, John, 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 John. And
Yeah.
17th century theater does the same damn thing. And that to me was so exciting. And later on, we read a play by Samuel Beckett, and again, pretty dark stuff because Beckett wrote originally in French, right? And he later
Uh-huh.
translated it into English. And there too, it's like, wow, every line, every line, every line, there's this little explosion, some little, and so the realization was all my life I'd seen reading as this thing that was get through these pages, write down the themes, answer these questions, blah blah blah. Reading, that was where I learned for myself that reading wasn't that. Reading is looking at some series of fireworks happening before you right there, and you can make them happen, and you can go back and make them happen again if that's what you want, and then you can think about what it means that they happened and why somebody said this and what else you can derive from that. It was that semester, that first three, introduction to French literature class. It just blew my mind because I thought, oh my God, there's all this stuff. And here I was,
That-
I had this little world that I thought was fine. And then, oh my God, there's all this stuff. That
That's
was what did it.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Wow. Wow. And we're talking about classes at KU, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Now, was there a moment in there when you thought to yourself, I could maybe do this professionally. I could be a professor doing this.
It occurred to me because
Okay.
so I'm sure I'm not revealing any anything that somebody doesn't already know when I say that as a college student, one of the things you think about is what the hell do I do after
Yeah,
this? And
sure.
and so I thought, well, I can sort of imagine. But I mean, you're 22 years old, whatever.
Sure.
You have this kind of fake idea of what it would be like to be a professor, but just sort of sit around and read books and talk about books all the time. It
Yeah,
actually doesn't sound bad. Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, I didn't, but it was more. That's more in the realm of sort of fantasized version of what life might be.
Sure.
Getting there, that I found that very daunting.
Yeah.
Graduate school, all that stuff. I mean, all the stuff you gotta do. At the same time,
Yeah.
I could sort of see at the end of that, wow, here's this life that could be like, it's I get to not. The one thing I didn't like about doing dishes was that I would always come home at night with my pants all wet, sort
Yeah.
of from the top down to the middle of my thighs, which can be
Yeah.
very embarrassing. And I remember I thought, well, this is there's a job where you don't have to come home with your pants all wet and smelling like sour cream. And so maybe maybe that would be good. But at the same time, I thought, gee, I can't be a professor. I'm not smart enough to be a professor. I don't work hard enough. I drifted into the conviction that I could do that slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of advice were you getting from your family and friends at this point about the prospects of academia?
My parents were not particularly they thought that I wouldn't stand a chance
Uh-huh.
because and I don't they didn't discourage me. They were just trying to be realistic. I say this without any criticism on their part at all because they're probably right to say this, that given the fact that I have a hard time staying with with a subject, and that that I have a very, very checkered academic career, et cetera. You probably shouldn't even think about going to graduate school because for that you have to be, you're not the type. And that, I mean, they were right. And at the same time, well, two things. I mean, literally, I thought, well, if I go to grad school, I'll have 2 years where I don't have to pay tuition, and I get a little stipend, $6,000 it was at the time, which to me was an amazing amount of money.
Yeah.
And I have to work a bit, and I don't come home with my pants all wet. And so it was literally just it was a way to kill 2 years, and then we'll see. In that 2 years, I had other revelations about how much I loved literature and what I could do with it that made me think, okay, in this case, I go on. But they, but they were not optimistic about my
Yeah.
chances in graduate school, put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think you might have done differently if you hadn't gone to graduate school? What other careers might you have entertained?
Well, I mean, of course, Rockstar was always a possibility. But
Yeah.
no, in realistic terms, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. Professional dishwasher wouldn't be bad. But I maybe it's just too long ago. At this point, I cannot imagine doing anything else. I cannot
Yeah.
imagine myself doing absolutely anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine you doing anything else either.
It's hard to
Uh,
picture, yeah.
yeah, yeah. What do you say to the student that's interested in French and French literature, as far as selection of college major goes, but maybe isn't so sure about the idea of teaching? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing that I always say is, why the hell not?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
teaching is really, really, really great. I think that it's actually funny to me how many people say that. Uh, I say, we possibly interested in teaching, and they immediately say, no, where did this happen? That this got drilled into them,
yeah.
that this is something to be afraid of. It isn't.
Right, right.
It's hard to get a job. There's the whole tenure thing. It's, blah, blah, blah. Universities are slowly, there's language departments specifically are sometimes under attack, et cetera. It's yeah, but it can be done, and people do it all the time, getting jobs in teaching. And I don't understand what there is not to like. I really, literally don't get it. I wasn't, I didn't know that I could teach. And then I learned it in grad school, and I learned it because I had to. You walk into a class and you got to do something, and
Yeah,
so I learned. Oh, okay, I can make things happen here, but it's not like I have some talent for it. It's just that literally it was an improvised thing. I figured out a way to kill 50 minutes at 3 times a week, and that's all it is. But so I don't understand why people don't want to go into teaching. If not, this is where I wish that there were some way that I could say, if you have a degree in French, that degree leads you to this job. That doesn't happen.
uh-huh.
There is no, it's not like you get a degree in, I don't know, accounting, and that leads you to this job. French doesn't work that way. French combines beautifully French major combines beautifully with other majors. Any
Sure.
other major is greatly enriched by a foreign language.
You bet.
It gives you the opportunity to do, for, full, internships abroad, potentially Fulbrights, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Work for international corporations, work for companies here in this country, and we have more and more of our students who are doing that, working for working for companies in this country that have, an internet presence or whatever in Canada or in France, and they have to answer questions from people who, that's all of that stuff. There's this whole realm of
You
stuff of
bet.
possible careers that opens up, but it is not. It's not the what I wish it were. That a degree in French guarantees you a job, yeah, for the
Sure.
rest of your life.
Sure.
Not how it works. And then on the other hand, um, it's also it's your opportunity. Well, I mean, it's your opportunity to be um, in touch with some of the most beautiful and magnificent stuff in the universe.
You bet.
It's your possible. It's this is education is about getting trained to work, but it's also about having your mind expanded.
Yeah.
And that my for me that encounter with the incredible beauty and imagination and sometimes subversiveness of French literature, it just changed the way that I saw the world and who I was myself. Well, I mean, that's what education should do.
You
And so
bet.
that's the job thing, very, very, very important. But don't neglect the other side of it.
I'm delighted to hear you say that you enjoy teaching as much as you do, because I know from firsthand experience that you're one of the finest teachers at this university.
Thank
What
you.
what what are some of the aspects of teaching that you most enjoy? And is it sometimes difficult to negotiate the teaching component of your position with the scholarship component? And I know there are other pieces to that too.
Yeah, yeah. That's always any
Yeah.
professor will tell you that that is always just a constant struggle.
Hmm.
You got to somehow three things, teaching, research, and service,
Right, right.
and all of them, any of them could take up all of your time if you let them. You know, and often think that I could just probably sit in my office and wait for people to come and say, "Could you do this? Could you do this? Could you do this?" Some administrative task or something like that, and my days would be full.
Hmm.
So don't sit in your office. That's the
Yeah.
moral of that story. But um, uh, uh, to me, teaching is less. I have less interference between teaching and research than I do with service and research. The
Okay.
service that's onerous to me. That's onerous. Teaching never feels onerous. It's I can get very sentimental about this sort of stuff. So I'm going to start with the really sentimental stuff, and then maybe I'll see what happens.
Sure.
Um, a classroom to me feels like a sacred space where it's people who have come together to try to figure stuff out, to try to sort out what's true and what isn't, or what what works as an argument and what doesn't, or what makes sense and what doesn't. And we all just do it together in this little room, and nobody's hopefully wanting to kill anybody else. It's not about hating
Yeah.
anybody or anything like that. It's about human brains, human minds, and souls coming together, closed off in a little room. I think the room is so important because this is the little space that is the bubble, and outside of that bubble, for those 50 minutes or whatever, things are happening. It's not like it goes away, but we are closeted here for the purpose of thinking about certain things. And I find that really, really, really beautiful.
I
That
do
doesn't,
too.
I don't know where else that happens. And also what I love about teaching is um, teaching literature, for instance. I mean, that's to me one of the great privilege. I mean, it's the greatest privilege of my life that I get to show people something that I deeply, deeply, deeply love, and maybe get them to love it in the way that I do. But if not, at least have some reaction to it. and I get to hear their reaction, and I get to give them my reaction to their reaction, and it's like you get to you get to I get to see what something I love looks like in the eyes of somebody else,
That's
and that's
magical.
just a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Now, I know that you've in for many years now, not just in recent years, but you've really made your mark as a literary translator. And I'd like to know how that came about. And also, do you feel a great responsibility to an author when you're translating his or her work? Kimberly of Lincoln asks, what's the greatest challenge as a literary
Oh,
translator?
oh, good God. Yeah, responsibility, absolutely. An enormous responsibility toward the author and toward the book. A huge, great,
Yeah.
big, giant responsibility. And then the greatest challenge is that you're never going to do exactly what the book does. You just
Uh-huh.
can't. The book is in, for instance, French, and it is intended for an audience of people who are French, who will understand it in a way that I don't think can ever be reproduced by a version of that in English for a readership who is not, yeah, whose culture is not French or right. But then beyond that, it's simply the sound of the words, the structure of the sentences, the whole thing. It's two different languages, and you can't just replace one with the other. You're doing something, what you're doing is not going to be the same thing as the book. And if you really love the book, that's hard. That's the greatest challenge.
Yeah.
Right. And then I guess even the greater challenge is that you've got to understand what can I do that is enough like that is kind of like what the book does, or that is even like what the book does, but it's just not exactly the same thing. What can I do to reproduce the thing that I love about this book? What can I do to reproduce that in a language that is what that is not necessarily going to be cooperative
Yeah.
about right getting across what the original has. So it's this great big long process for me of um, I only translate books I love, and then I do a really fast version of it, and then I go back and I try to read it all different kinds of ways. I revise only looking at my translation sometimes. Sometimes I revise looking at the original sentence by sentence. Sometimes, if I have time, I revise backwards, last page, next to last page, etc.
Wow.
Sometimes, if I really have time, I revise every page in random order. Just pick out a page from the manuscript, revise it, put a date on, say done, stick it back in, find another one. The idea is that books exist in all kinds of different ways, and one of them is as a linear experience like that,
Yeah.
and the other is as
Oh,
a series of moments. Yeah,
that
and so
is
you
so
try to
creative.
yeah, isn't that cool? So I'm sort of pleased with having discovered that. It works really, really well. So to me, the challenge of translation is that it's impossible. The beauty of translation is that you find ways, but it takes time, and thought, and endlessly going back and endlessly questioning yourself and endlessly trying to get closer, closer, closer. Uh, but the beauty is when that happens, when through whatever process and however many revisions, and I do a lot of revisions, after 20 revisions, I'm reading through my latest version and I hear suddenly, oh God, yes, that's that thing. That's that thing that I loved in the original. And it's not the original's voice. It's a different voice. It's not my voice either. But that's that thing. When you see that actually happen, when you see that actually take place on the page in front of you, well, it's like that experience of, my introductory French literature class. It's like, wow, suddenly I see this thing. This thing is now here. I see it, and that's what you're always after. But my God, it's such a lot of work to get to
Yes. I dare I say that it sounds almost like you see the translation process as a creative act in
every time.
itself.
Very definitely. It can't not be.
Yeah.
By definition, if you're changing this to that, you're creating something. You're creating a text in
Hmm.
English. Of course it's creative. But it's just as earlier on I said it's possible to see reading as something you just get through, and then suddenly I realized that's not what it is at all. Similarly with translation, I could say I've done one line, I've done two lines, I've done three lines, and that's a way of translating. But then the real thing is when you see it not as something to be got through, but as a sort of an ecstatic experience that is that changes the way I guess you see the world. I don't know. I'm getting pretentious, but it is not something to be endured. It's something to be delighted in.
Sure, absolutely. No, totally. Can you tell us how it came about that you did the translation way
Oh,
back when of
yeah.
Jules Verne's Mysterious Island, one of my favorites?
Yeah. So uh, I'm going to go a little bit further back. When I first came here, this is how I got started translating to begin with. When I first came here, the University of Nebraska Press was very famous for their series of translations into English of contemporary European literature,
Okay.
largely French. And the head of the press, Bill Regier, was a great guy, really great guy. And he took me out to lunch just when I just showed up here as an assistant professor. I guess he wanted to talk actually about whether I would be interested in having the University of Nebraska Press publish my thesis. And so I told him about my thesis, and he didn't actually seem very interested, understandably. And so we had to kill time because we were only, I think, 10 minutes into our lunch. And he said, well, have you ever thought about translation? But this is hard because for a professor, translation is a thing you're not supposed to do. It doesn't
Yeah.
count. It doesn't count. It's not research.
Uh-huh.
And so, as an assistant professor, you got to think about those things. And because you got to get tenure, and I want to do something that's going to count for tenure. And so I thought, well, and he said, but just a coincidence, have you any? We're interested in translation. Have you found any young, untranslated French writers who you think are exciting and you think might go well in English? And as a matter of fact, I had just before that discovered the books of a woman called Marie Redonnet, which just absolutely blew my mind. And so I told him, well, yes, actually, there's this person, Marie Redonnet. She's so magnificent. And he said, well, why don't you try translating her? And again, my doubts came up again. And he said something that really changed my life. He said, you could write an academic book that'll be read by 50 people, or you can write a translation that'll be read by 5,000 people.
Yeah.
If you care about literature, which of those is the more?
Wow. That's compelling.
Yeah, it is. And so that really convinced me. And so I came back to my office from lunch, and I sat down. And I thought, oh well, let's just give it a try. Translate this first page, see what that's like. And I had another of my ecstatic experiences that I'm continually having. This is so fantastic. This is so great. And so I went to see a colleague of mine in French. I said, "Look, I want to translate. Can I translate? Is that okay? As an assistant professor, is it okay to translate?" He said, "No, no, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You can't. You'll never get tenure, and you can't. You can't. You can't possibly, you know, get anywhere as a translator, etc." And so I said, "Okay, good, fine, thanks." I came back and I closed my door and went right back to translating, and haven't stopped since. So to answer your question, finally, at one point person working at the University of Nebraska Press quit and got a job at Random House in New York. And then she actually got in touch with me and said, "Hey, would you like to do Jules Verne for Random House?" And so I said yes, and that was that. But I always feel a little sheepish about that story because that's I got that because of a connection, and I don't like
Uh-huh.
to think of people getting places because of connections.
Yeah.
But um, but That's what it was. It was
Well,
so it's good to have connections as well as anything else.
I think it was meant to be because it's a magnificent
Yeah,
translation.
it's so
Very,
funny. I think I read that book. That's actually a book that I read in an abridged version when I was like 11,
uh-huh.
and I sort of I liked it. It was stuff happens. Translating again, it was kind of a weird thing to go back to. It's like, wow, I remember this. I remember this strange feeling.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, I see from time to time the wonderful undergraduate honors courses that you teach occasionally about French underground literature and culture, and I'm thinking those just must be terrific fun. And I wonder if there are any other courses that you'd really be interested in teaching that you haven't yet.
What a good question. I really love teaching literature in translation, and
Uh-huh.
I wish that I could do more of that. It's I think that s- students would no, I don't want to say that. I think that there's such a lot of fantastic stuff in French, um, and not only in French, all over the world. Um, and if you don't speak the language, you can feel like, well, that's something that I can't have access to, and that isn't the case. It there actually there's a lot more translation going on nowadays of contemporary literature than there was when I first got here. So, in fact, a course that I really wanted to do for the honors people was just um, contemporary novels, say a novel from say 20 somewhere written between somewhere between 2021 and 2022 from all over the world. And I
Uh-huh.
had this list. I had Icelandic, I had Bolivian, I had Peru, I had Pakistani, and I had Senegalese, and all over the world, translated, yeah. But these all of these things from just the most widely scattered, far-flung places all over the world, as far away from here as you can possibly get, and yet which are accessible to us here because we can read them in translation.
Right.
And that's to me, that's so exciting to be able to see, other parts of the world through their own eyes, even if it's through the voice of a translator. And to me, that's a
Certainly
really
is.
important part of education,
Yeah.
to sort of get out of as Americans, we live in this little bubble where, we can easily just survive on our own culture, but there's so much more out there. And so I would love to do that. The people at the honors college, I think they told me, oh, young people don't just want to read novels. I'm like, oh, really? But anyway, we negotiated a bit, and I got it into dystopian novels from around the world. So
Okay.
same idea. It's just that it's around the theme. I don't, personally don't like themes. I like randomness, but they wanted a theme. So a theme of specifically the dystopian novel. And there's some really fantastic dystopian novels from Japan, and one from Egypt that I thought was really great, but the students didn't like it that much. And a really weird Finnish one. And it's there's so much stuff out there. Once again, so I would dearly, dearly, dearly love to do more courses in translation by which I mean reading literature in translation, whether
Yeah.
for the honors people or just for a larger audience. And it's hard because there doesn't seem to be room for that.
Uh-huh.
There isn't. Students don't seem to be, it doesn't fit into the requirements and the blah blah blahs, and that makes me sad because I'd love to be able to do that and to show them stuff, and to learn stuff myself, because often these classes, I haven't read the books. I read books without having read them. What the hell? And then sort of figure out what to do with them when they come in. And
Yeah.
so I learn stuff too.
Yeah. No, those would be terrific classes. Maybe it's time to re-examine the requirements therein.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
so.
yeah. What is it about fiction that makes it such a palatable and compelling conduit to talk about things like history and philosophy and political science in ways that nonfiction doesn't?
That's an interesting question. To me, it's so. Fiction does this amazing thing. A text does this amazing thing that you have this series of little marks on a piece of paper, that your eye runs over, kind of like a barcode. And it's exactly like a barcode. And from that, creates this image in your head. And that image is yours alone, but of course it is inspired by what you read. And it can take whatever form it is that you want it to take, but it is real in a way that reality can never be. I don't mean
Uh-huh.
that it's more real, it's just a different kind of real. It's a more, I guess I would call it a more sort of saturated real. It's like a real with bright, bright, bright colors. And so to me, it's like um, truths can be expressed in that way, in a in that form, in that projected form of the book in my head, in a way that is organically built up in constructed before my eyes in my head, as opposed to looking at something and saying, here is this fact, here is this fact, here is this fact, here is this fact. You read a work of fiction, and what you're doing is making all that stuff happen.
Yeah.
And so it has a power, which is, I mean, I'm glad there's such a thing as nonfiction. I'm glad I don't have to read it, but it's a good thing that it exists. But I'm glad there's such a thing as truth, for that matter. But I'm glad not to have to deal with. But um, but when the idea, I mean, reading is you making something in your head. It is you making something, and when you're making it, the idea gets expressed in a way that's much richer than it can ever be when it's simply you looking at the idea that somebody else is putting in.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that makes entire sense. Absolutely. Have you ever tried your hand at writing
I'm
fiction?
terrible at it. I am
Are you?
terrible at it. I have tried, and it's embarrassingly awful. It's if I just stuck with it, maybe. The problem is that I mean, it's a very very typical beginner's problem. I'm way too self-conscious. I want everything to be so, and you got to get past that. I imagine I could probably do it okay, but
Yeah.
I don't actually have very much imagination, to tell you the truth, and I really love. I have a really good imagination for understanding what other people are doing, what other people are saying. Not much of an imagination for kind of come up with stories of my own. So I don't know. Do you? Do you
Yeah.
write?
I'm a music guy
Okay,
as well. So for me, it's all songwriting.
I've got it.
When you were involved with music in college, were you in the songwriting aspect of things too, or
I mean, I wrote songs,
yeah?
but they were I was never very good at lyrics. I couldn't do lyrics, but
Uh-huh.
I was pretty good at melodies, and so I usually
Yeah.
came up with sort of crappy lyrics to try to go with the melody a little bit. I wouldn't call them songs exactly. They were things that we would play that
Sure.
that vaguely resembled songs.
Absolutely. Well, I wonder if you would take us into your library at home. What would we find there? What are your tastes in reading? And we know a little about your tastes in music now, but art and film, and you've implied that you read mostly, if not all, fiction. Do you have desert island books, movies, albums that you would consider that way?
All right. So one thing you'd find in my library, to answer that question first, is a great big collection of what in French are called topo guide. So in France, you can walk yeah, all over Europe. They have routes by which you can walk for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks from town to town, through on roads or through woods or through farmers' fields, etc. And so they publish these little guides, for how to get from this town to that town on
Yeah.
foot. Yeah, with these very detailed maps, etc. And that's something I've done ever since I first, well, for the past 30 years. It's something I've done every summer is go over there and try to walk for 2 or 3 weeks more if
Sounds
possible.
awesome. Yeah.
And so to me, that's also walking in the country, sometimes getting lost, sometimes having to deal with, storms or cows or all the things that could happen to you, that's a wonderful moment when all the stuff that I do here, all the sitting in offices, etc., suddenly just goes away, and it's like I'm out in the real world just for a little while. I'm not that crazy about the real world.
Uh-huh.
I like the fictive world better in many ways, but it's so
Me
lovely
too.
to be just in a place, which is to say, in a woods. And there's one spot on like this on the entire planet, in this particular woods with these trees, this little stream, this the way this sun is coming through. This is a place. There's one place like this, and I'm there. I love that feeling. So that's a thing that you might find there that would surprise you.
Yeah.
Apart from Desert Island, I don't think I could do it with the books because I I have reached the point where I only want to discover new things. I only
Mhm.
want to read things that I don't know, and I don't really feel like rereading. Apart from teaching, I mean, in teaching I reread and it's wonderful. But what I really like is discovering new writers, brand new stuff that I don't know anything about. And so, if a desert island means I take a certain collection of books with me, I would quickly become disgusted with them because they would just remind me of the fact that I can't do what I really love to do, which is always to be getting new stuff, new stuff, new stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Movies, that's a little different for me. What I wish that I wish that students, I often recommend that students watch um, movies by Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Particularly those who sort of late mid 50s to, or even late 40s really, up until say until the late 60s. But those are such Vertigo or North by Northwest, Rear Window. Those are such perfect models of storytelling and of a combination of the visual and the verbal and of kind of almost art and action. They're phenomenal
Yeah.
things.
They sure are.
Yeah. And another one is Federico Fellini, the
Yeah.
Italian. Yeah. So, I mean, eight and a half is like, there is just no finer thing in this universe, I don't think, than eight and a half. My God, my God, my God. But a lot of the Roma, the slightly overlooked Roma. My God, that's a fantastic movie. It's unforgettable ending of anyway. Um, and La Dolce Vita. I mean, that's good. I like it less than eight and a half.
Hmm.
But Knights of Cabiria. I saw that recently, and boy, Fellini is just always, always, always brilliant, always, always
Yeah.
amazingly brilliant. And then I love Wes Anderson. I just absolutely that's this summer in Belgium. I saw um, Asteroid City, and I was like, I couldn't believe the theater afterwards. It's like I don't want to go back to the real world. This is so perfect. That thing
Yeah.
I saw was so utterly perfect in terms of the look, but also the intelligence and the endless surprises. He would be if there were a Desert Island movie thing, I could actually probably do that, maybe with those three.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you a collector of any kind? Do you appreciate first editions or things like that?
No, no.
Okay.
I'm my books are all a mess.
Okay.
I don't collect. Do I collect anything at all? I don't think I do actually. No.
Okay. 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 When's the last time you watched TV?
Last night I watch TV all the time. Yeah, I love TV. I love TV. I have it on all the time. It's now I said yeah, music. Often I'll watch TV for 2 hours and then have music after that while I finish grading or something like that. But yeah, I love TV. I love so I'm as a translator, what I've discovered is that a thing that I really need is a whole bunch of sources of language, a whole bunch of different kinds of language from all
Okay.
different kinds of sources that I'm hearing all the time. Often, when I'm doing a book, there's some phrase that's like, oh God, I can't figure out how would I say this? How would I say this? How would I say this? And then I just hear it And that can be, I hear somebody say it, oh yeah, that's it. And it can be somebody walking in the street. Uh, it can be something in the newspaper. I also read newspapers on paper
Uh-huh.
religiously.
Yeah.
Or it can be something I hear on TV, on the news, on a commercial, on any idiotic thing. They're all sources of language that can that are useful to me. But more than that, I just like to know what's going on.
Yeah.
I find the world really, really, really interesting. And so I'm absolutely addicted to the news. I watch I watch local news. I watch national news. I watch PBS news, and I watch MSNBC. I watch BBC. I love news. I love it's that's like a novel. It's all this stuff going on, and I so often tell to students that a newspaper is like the greatest novel that was ever written because it's like there's all this stuff and some stories come up, go away. Sometimes they're little, sometimes they're big, sometimes they're horrible and monstrous, and sometimes they're funny. And it's like there's all this detail, and you can actually decide which of these stories am I going to combine with which other one. But television is for me actually. I don't think I could do that. I really don't.
That totally surprises me. Lori won't forgive me if I don't ask you, are you aware of the TV series Lost?
Oh yeah, that was great. I love that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I think when she got me to watch it and I said, this is kind of like Mysterious Island in a
I,
lot of ways. And she said, you have to ask Dr. Stump about that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's also like a lot of contemporary French fiction that I like that is like continually um, not letting you quite understand what's going on and continually
Yeah.
kind of evolving before your eyes.
Yeah.
That's a lot of the fiction that I love does that very thing. So yeah, no, I thought that was a brilliant show.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Stump, to close up, we're curious to know what for you are the best and worst parts of living in Lincoln, Nebraska.
One thing I love about this place is the diversity of the population.
Hmm.
Way back at the end of the 70s, it was decided that Lincoln would be a resettlement center for refugees from Vietnam.
Yep,
So we got a large Vietnamese community that sort of installed itself and really sort of changed the feeling of the town. That was
absolutely.
essentially how it was when I got here. That there was a large Asian community, and then that has expanded. Now there's Somali and Iraqi. Um, we're going to have Palestinians soon. Who knows?
Hmm.
And that to me makes the city feel so much richer. It's
Yes.
it's always people laugh when you talk about that, and then it all comes down to food. But it is nevertheless the case that, for instance, the place that calls itself the Oriental Market. That's the word Oriental is non is not politically correct anymore, but they call themselves Oriental Market. It's on North 27th Street, just south of Vine Street, and that place is so amazing because you go in there and it's like they have food from. It's like they sell. It's a grocery store and they sell
Hmm.
stuff from Korea, Japan, Thailand, China, Vietnam, and it's like you walk into that place and you're walking into this whole other reality that's right here in Lincoln. You see the stuff that is maybe for somebody who is from Malaysia or whatever, everyday stuff, everyday sauces or condiments, whatever, lined up on the shelf. And for us is like, what is that? What is that? You can just walk through this door and suddenly it's this whole other world. Potato chips from Singapore, for God's sake. Singapore's
Yeah.
favorite potato chip. What is Singapore's favorite potato chip? I love those places. I go in and I buy all kinds of stuff because I'm just, what is this? What is this? What is that place, the Guerrero Market, another one on 11th Street. Fantastic carnitas and other Mexican food, as well as just cans of stuff and all that. And so that side of it, the way in which you can walk through a door and be transported into this completely different universe, different world, not a
Yes.
different universe, but a different reality. That's so exciting to me. To me, the worst part is Nebraskans do not have a high enough opinion of themselves.
Mm.
Everybody here seems to be convinced
Ah,
that this is a small and boring place, and it doesn't have to be. It absolutely does not have to be. It's beautiful here, and we have such an interest. The whole area has such an interesting history as a place where that exists because the water is salty. Wow, isn't
yeah.
that fascinating? That's why the town exists. We have as much of a history as anybody else, and I think people are not proud enough. I don't like that word, but people do not understand what a fascinating place this can be, and so they make it a little dull. Frankly, to go back to Lawrence, for instance, downtown Lincoln makes me sad because in Lawrence, you have shops galore and
Yeah.
all kinds of different things. Here, we have too many bars, too many sandwich places. It's small. It's small and
Yeah.
it's limited. And it doesn't have to be like that, you know?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
That's absolutely so. Very good. I know that you know the good places in downtown Lincoln because I see you there from time to time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
A
love
no
Yaya's. I love
Yaya's,
Jake's. Yeah. Duffy's.
a
Yeah.
novel idea.
Novel
Yeah,
idea. Absolutely.
yeah,
Right. Oh, there's tons of
absolutely.
stuff. Gomez Art Supply is fantastic. I love Thread,
Yeah, right.
the clothes store. Tons of good stuff there. More. I want more.
I do too. I do too. Dr. Stump, this has been tremendous. I could talk to you for 2 more hours and still have questions left over. But I want to tell you what a personal honor it's been to have you join us today. It really means a lot for me. We've done a lot of these broadcast episodes, and this one is right at the top for me. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure and a great honor for me to hear you say that.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, best wishes to you going forward. I hope you have a great rest of your semester.
Right. I hope you do too. And also, any students out there who are listening, anytime you want to ask or talk about, French or anything else, you can find me. You can find my email on the Department of Modern Languages website. Write me. I'd love to, if you want to talk about possibly taking classes in French or whatever, write me. I'd be delighted.
That's tremendous. That's very gracious of you. Thank you. Okay. Take care.
Thank you so much. Great pleasure.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.